Hi, Wow Embossing friends. I'm so excited to be sharing a sneak peek with you. This is Nikki of Nikki Hearts Cards, and we are going to look at the new Duo. We'll also look at what these look like. These are brand new embossing powders for WOW's new May release. We'll look at these and we're going to look at ways to use embossing powders that you may not have thought of before, but also ways to use some of your tools with embossing powders, like your embossing pen. So this duo has a red and an orange with some beautiful gold sparkle that goes throughout. So really fun to use. I am going to use this on die cuts. I'm going to use it on an embossing folder. We're going to have lots of fun. So we're going to start with these lily die cuts. So I love floral cards, and I'm going to cut out a couple of these lilies, and I'm going to create an orange and a red lily, and they are going to look perfect on this card. So we're going to kind of match this embossing powder to some different inks, and we'll combine lots of things together. Now, these have a background color to them that's orange, so you could just swipe this on a paper and die cut it, but I always tend to take a little bit more difficult route because I want my colors to be as bright as they possibly can. So I knew that I had an ink that was almost exactly this orange color. So I'm going to show you what it looks like without the ink behind it, and I'm going to show you what it looks like over the dark ink. Okay, so here's what it looks like just over white paper. You can see in spots I didn't get the ink quite as thick, so I have a few little white spots that show through. Let me show you what it looks like over a solid orange piece of paper. So I grabbed my orange ink, which is Catherine Pooler Mandarin Spice. Okay, this is a very similar orange to what's on the background. You don't have to be, if you don't have an ink color that's quite right, you can just do something dark and it's going to make your embossing powder look so much darker. And I love dark, bold colors. So once I get my entire piece of paper the correct color, now you could start out with colored cardstock. That might make this easier. I just loved that the Catherine Pooler Mandarin Spice matched so well with these embossing powders. So I'm using my WOW embossing pad and I'm adding some clear ink. Notice it does not transfer onto the pad. And I'm going to add the embossing powder here. So to show you the comparison, this side is the one that we added the WOW embossing powder to, and see how much darker it is? Well, look at the other side when it catches the light. The other side was just the Catherine Pooler ink, and I placed the embossing powder over it. So you see the difference that just adding that embossing ink makes. It definitely makes it brighter. Now, my first piece right there on the left is actually going to end up being our embossing, but this kind of shows you that when you're ink blending and you're making something that matches, you can use, especially if you've got a set of inks that are similar. So what I did is I took all of the inks that are in the order or in the same category as Mandarin Spice because I knew that that matched my embossing powder. So I've got apricot, orange peel, and Mandarin Spice. And then I know I've got 3 layers of this flower. The bottom layer that's on the left, we're just going to toss that one and we're going to use our embossing powder. So it's going to be a sparkly layer. But these other 2 layers need to kind of graduate their color, increasing it so that it gets darker for the flower. So my goal is to have a middle layer that's kind of a medium color and then the top layer be a little bit darker. Here are the 2 panels that I heat embossed, so I'm just checking what seems to match the best and if I need to add a little bit more to my flower. That way you can kind of see what I ended up doing. So I did add a little bit more detail to these flowers just to make them darker because I felt that looked a little bit better. But you could see you could do this with regular die cuts if you wanted, and you really could pick any of these die cuts to be your sparkly layer. I just liked having that bottom layer as the sparkle because it showed through the flower so well. We've got our orange flower. Now we need our red flower, and we're going to follow the same pattern where we use the colored cardstock behind the embossing powder. The perfect match that I found for the other embossing powder is Rouge. This is from Catherine Pooler as well. Any red ink would probably work, but this one is very close to that embossing powder, so it really matches quite well. So I'm going to color this whole sheet in and we're going to cut a piece out of it. And look at how gorgeous this turned out. Isn't that gorgeous with the red and the gold? So beautiful. I could see this being great on Christmas cards too. So we're going to do the same process using inks that are in the same family as rouge. So I'm using rose petals, rouge, and peppermint scrub, and that's a light, a medium, and a dark. And I'm just adjusting. I've got my little embossed piece right here, so I know that I want these to be just a slightly different color. I'm not going to go into the detail too much here because this is not an ink blending video. I'm more showing you all the embossing powder fun. So let's go on to the end project, and I'm going to show you a cool way to use your embossing powders with embossing folders. Here's a quick up close of how those flowers are looking. They are so beautiful, but we're going to make them stand out even more by using a dark purple background. Not only are we going to emboss this dark purple background, we are going to use some embossing powder on it as well. So you'll see that I did add a dark edge around this. This just gives it more of a spotlight type effect when you've got it through that embossing powder. And since I've got these beautiful flowers that we're going to put on top of this, I want the background to really make those flowers look even more magnificent. So I'm using some black soot distress ink, and I'm going around purple cardstock, which I believe this cardstock, I'll make sure I link everything for you in the description. And then I'm going to run this through an embossing folder, and then we'll use my trick on adding embossing powder. Okay, so here's the embossing folder that we're going to use. And I am going to say there are two ways to go about getting embossing powder on the back of your card in this design. One is to press it in with the embossing plate. But today, what I'm going to do is show you something different. I'm going to use powder all over the front of this card because you do not want your embossing powder to stick to the front. And then I'm going to grab the Wow embossing pen, and I am going to trace the design. This is the only easy way that I have come up with to actually get the embossing powder on the raised areas. So most of the time when you're doing an embossing folder, it's very easy to get the embossing powder into the depressed area, like pushed into the paper. But when you're trying to do it this way, it's a little bit more difficult and a little bit more messy. So I really love the detail I can create with the Wow embossing pen. This is something that I did not know that I really needed to have until I was playing with embossing folders. So what I did is when I got about a fourth of a way down the panel, I went on and put the embossing powder on and heated it up. You could just leave it like that. I just didn't want to get that embossing powder on my pen, and I wanted to make sure that I got the whole design. So I went on and used my heat gun on this and heated it up and got that set. Then I started again with the embossing powder pen. So I continued this throughout the design and it turned out so beautiful. Just wait till I put these sparkly flowers on this background with the hint of embossing powder. It looks so beautiful. And I used the orange of those two colors for this background. You could pick the red. It didn't really matter. The dark background allows the color to show through barely, but it really shows off that gold glitter in the powder. And here's how that's looking. I wiped everything off, all the powder off of that microfiber. Looks beautiful. But wait, I have one more amazing thing to really bring this card home. I started to organize this and think about my sentiment, and then I realized I was going to use this duo to create an ombre sentiment. Let me show you the easiest way I found to do this. Since I'm using a die cut for my sentiment, I grabbed some double-sided adhesive and I'm going to put it over the piece of paper, and then I'm going to place my sentiment down so that I'll be able to take that release paper off and use it as the sticky element to hold on to my embossing powder. And then I'm going to show you the easiest way to make an ombre sentiment. So I've got this release paper here. I'm going to use my tweezers to get it started and then pull the release paper off. It doesn't matter if you're touching the sticky. And then I like to dip my sentiment into the different colors. Since I use coffee filters for my embossing powder, I've got kind of like a little tray here that I can dip them in. And then if I don't have enough, I can just slide it down in like this and just kind of go to wherever I want, halfway, a third, whatever floats your boat. We're starting with the orange and then we're going to finish with the red. This is kind of how I liked it. Now for the red, I just poured it on. I'd already heat set the top, so I was able to hold that with my tweezers, and it's a little easier if you just pour on the rest of this adhesive, and then we'll heat it up, and I'm gonna show you some final card pictures. Look how this hugs looks. It looks so cute, ombre like that. It reminds me of a sunset. And then I just set up the rest of the card, glued it down, and here's what I came up with. While you're looking at these final pictures, make sure that you've hit the like and subscribe button. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Also, if you have any questions, all of the products that I used will be linked in the description. There's a blog post with this as well. So I'd love to see you here, and I hope to see you back on the channel soon. Have a great day. Bye.